Simon and Sarah are now leaving the forecourt of the cafe in the blue Austin. There has been a lot of rain, and as they leave, the car bumps up and down over large puddles and potholes before they get out onto the main road. It's a horrible, wet, winterish late afternoon. They speed along. At one point, they pass a couple of bikers who have been keeping out of sight just off the road behind some trees. The bikers clip their helmets down and set off to pursue the blue Austin. The wipers are going in the car, and Simon is having difficulty seeing out of the front windscreen. And then they both hear the roaring of engines. Simon looks back, over his shoulder. The bikers are chasing them. Simon is driving at a pace, but the bikers from the cafe are closing in. Both bikes overtake and get in front of them. They then obstruct, causing Simon to have to slow down. Simon tries to weave around them, but they keep blocking his path. Simon is looking annoyed. Sarah has a frown on her face. "I'd pull up if I were you," she says. "Like hell I will," Simon replies. Simon has a determined look on his face. He hits the gas. He tries to get between the bikers, but they weave about and continue to block him. There are a bunch of metal milk churns sitting on a big table up ahead, just on the verge. Simon, in his waving about, hits right off of them, and they scatter. Sarah lets out a scream at the clattering and banging. Simon is really riled now as the bikers speed away into the distance. Okay, Simon mutters to himself. Sarah is looking increasingly worried. Simon steps on it. He races towards the two bikers ahead, catches up with them, and positions the Austin in the gap between them. Then he goes full throttle. "What are you doing?" Sarah shouts. "For God's sake, stop!" she screams. She grabs his arm. "Will you stop?" He hits the back wheel of the older biker. The bike flies right off of the road, and the biker is thrown with it. The bike strikes a stone wall and explodes, and then it becomes completely engulfed in flames. Sarah screams and covers her face. The younger biker stops to check on his mate. He has a look of horror on his face at the burning motorbike. "Bloody fool." She shouts at him. "Well, I didn't start it," he answers back defiantly. "Well, stop, he might be dead," she shouts. "Stop? You saw what happened." "Yes, I saw all right, you went completely crazy. Now stop." She grabs the steering wheel. "What the hell are you doing?" she shouts at her. Their blue car is swerving all over the road and goes onto the grass at a bend. "Will you stop? I want to get out." She grabs at the ignition keys. They are having an intense struggle. She opens the door and jumps out of the car. "Sarah," he shouts. She lands on the grass, puffs and pants for a bit, then quickly recovers, gets up and starts to run. Simon is now out of the car and chasing her. He catches up and firmly grabs her arm. She struggles. "Let go of me," she shouts. "Get back in the car." He manhandles her. "Get back in the car," he shouts. While they are wrestling around, a white Rover P6 slows down nearby. It's a civilian car. It comes to a halt. Two men get out. "Get back in the car," Simon commands. "Let go of me," she answers back. Two mature and well-dressed blokes in long coats get out of the white car. "You saw what happened," Simon says to Sarah. "Get back in the car." "No," she cries. The confident blokes walk a bit closer. "Anything wrong, miss?" asks the one wearing the hat. He is distinguished looking and has an authority about him. They both stop their struggling and turn to address this man. "What do you mean?" Simon answers back. Pretending all is well, the bloke moves forward with purpose. "I was talking to the lady," he says firmly. "You all right?" He addresses Sarah directly. There is concern in his voice. Yes, she replies, a bit out of breath. "Yes, fine," she says convincingly. She even manages to put on a smile for the gentleman. "Are you sure everything is okay?" he asks with some doubt in his voice. She maintains her smile. "Yes, everything's perfectly okay, thanks." She touches her chest in a gesture of sincerity. The guys are not completely convinced, but they decide to leave it at that. They walk back to their car and drive off. They are both a bit calmer now as they stand there on the grass watching the white Rover drive away. Simon takes his whiskey bottle out of his jacket pocket and has a swig. "Why didn't you say something?" he asks her. She is clutching her coat shut tightly around her neck in a protective gesture. "You had the chance?" She maintains eye contact with him, but says nothing. "All right, you win," he says in a conciliatory manner. "Let's get back and take a look." Referring to the biker incident, he walks towards the blue car. "It's a bit late for that now, isn't it?" she says as he walks away. He stops and turns around. Why? What do you mean? Those two there will be ahead of us. She flicks her head in reference to the Good Samaritans who have driven off. And the police could be there by now. She grabs his whiskey bottle and throws it to the ground. One whiff of your breath, she scolds him. I think I better drive. He remains silent. I can drive, you know. Or do you want to see my license? She says, sarcastically. Sarah walks over the grass to the car. He stands there for a moment, contemplating, and then decides it will be best to go along with her. He walks over to the car and gets into the passenger seat. She revs up the engine and drives off. The night darkness has fully arrived now as they drive along, and they only have one working headlight now. The other one is bust. Sarah is at the wheel now as they drive along the dark road. How much further to Highcliffe? She asks him. I don't know, he says tiredly. He looks at the mileometer. An hour, maybe. There are twin headlights close behind them, and up ahead there is a checkpoint. The police are stopping cars and asking the drivers where they have come from and where they are going to. Sarah stops the car and looks ahead at a checkpoint way in the distance, down at the bottom of a long hill. If that kid was killed back there, she says, they could have your number. Already? He queries. How long does it take to put out a call? She informs him. They look ahead to the flashing lights at the checkpoint. Come on, let's get off the road. They can't stay there forever, she says. Well, we just passed a place back there, he says. She winds the window down to get a better look and reverses the car. They drive the other way, in the opposite direction of the checkpoint, and then go off the road onto a muddy track. After a while, she parks the car in the concealment of a wood. I'm tired. She yawns and strokes her brow. I think I'll put my head down. We could be here to the morning. Sarah rests her head back on the seat. It's pitch black outside. Listen, Sarah, he says. I think it is best if we take you to the nearest hotel and find you a room for the night. If that boy's dead, I don't want you involved. He speaks as if he means it. She leans her head up and takes him seriously. If he's dead, then you'll need a witness. He turns towards her, looking perplexed. I don't understand you. 1 minute you want to get out, the next you're trying to look after me? She thinks for a moment and then puts on sympathetic eyes. You helped me, didn't you? She says. He holds her gaze. Might have been better if I hadn't, he replies. Are you sorry you gave me a lift? She says with sadness on her face. No, course not, he says softly. She gives him a charming and gentle smile. Here, let me. Simon leans the car seat back for Sarah to get comfortable. As he lies back himself, his attention is drawn to her finely shaped legs. He has a problem taking his eyes off of them, and this sparks off some memories. Simon's mind starts to drift to an encounter he had with an attractive, dark-haired lady. He is making love to her, in bed, or trying to, but he has to call it quits. He turns away from her. What is it? His lover asks. Is it me? I told you before it's nothing to do with you, he says, sounding a bit pathetic. What is it then? She says, giving him another chance to explain himself. It's difficult to talk about, he whispers. Back in the car, Sarah comes out of her doze. Did you say something? She asks Simon. No, he says, with a troubled face. He turns away from her. Good night, he says politely. Night, she replies. As the rain pelts down on the car windscreen, Simon does not sleep. He just sits and stares in anguish. He eventually drifts off. And then there is the sound of birds tweeting. It's morning and the sun is shining. Simon comes to in the passenger seat. He yawns, and then he looks over with affection to the driver's seat. But it's empty. His face shows concern. Simon quickly gets out of the car in a mild panic. He stands in the bright light, wringing his hands and shouting for Sarah. He darts about, his head going from side to side. Sarah, where are you? His voice echoes off the land. Sarah. He jogs about, searching and getting out of breath. He heads to the edge of the nearby country road. A gray Land Rover speeds by, fully laden with hay bales. He looks out further to the main road. It is now busy with traffic. He runs back to the car. As he walks around the vehicle, he crouches down and takes a closer look at the left-hand headlight. It's completely smashed up, with no bulb in it. He jumps back into the driver's seat, starts the car up, and revs hard. The blue Austin is stuck in the mud, and there is little traction. The wheels just spin. Eventually, after a lot of impatient revving, he manages to get the car moving. He heads onto the main road and then starts to drive like a maniac again. His face is full of anger. "Bitch!" he shouts to himself. Meanwhile, looking quite relaxed, Sarah is wandering around the local grocery store. Her handbag is dangling over the shoulder of her black top. She doesn't have her coat on. She has a handbasket and is picking up some items from the shelves. She hears a car speeding along outside. She sees through the window that it is a blue Austin. She rushes outside, basket in hand, and waves her arms at the car, but it has already sped by. "Simon!" she shouts. "Simon!" Sarah looks distraught as she watches the car fade away into the distance. Inside the blue Austin, Simon is still in a foul mood. His face looks mean and moody. His chin is protruding. "Bitch!" he mutters to himself in anger. Sarah walks along a quiet country road with her bag of messages from the shop. She sees a horse just behind a gate in a field. Her face lights up. She heads over to stroke it. "Good boy," she says with a big smile on her face. She feeds the horse a potato. Her memory then flashes back to when she was a girl, feeding her own horse in the stables. She hears tittering from the hayloft, a man and a girl. She walks up the wooden steps to investigate. She sees her uncle persuading the young stable girl to take her clothes off, and then they start to roll about in the hay. The young Sarah is shocked and loses her balance on the wooden stairs. In her memory, all of the potatoes spill out of her bag and bounce and roll down the stable stairs. Back to present-day reality, outside the Horsefield gate, Sarah has dropped her bag of shopping, and the potatoes she purchased are all over the road. She crouches down to pick them up off the ground. One at a time, she places them back into her bag. There is the growling sound of a big car approaching. Preoccupied, Sarah does not hear it coming. An eccentric-looking man in his 50s, with a longish, gray bushy beard, stops his silver-colored Alvis DH coupe just a few yards from Sarah. He gets out of the big, open-topped classic car and walks towards her. The man looks well over 6 feet tall. He has a dark, flat cap on his head and is wearing a long, black coat. His straggly gray hair sticks out from either side of his cap. He addresses Sarah in a cultured American accent. "Bonjour, mademoiselle." The tall man greets Sarah by casually touching his cap. He is wearing light brown leather driving gloves. "May I offer you the pleasure and the privilege of a ride in this magnificent motor vehicle," he says, in a flamboyant manner. He glances towards his car. She looks at him, and then the car. She is only slightly wary. "Oh, I hasten to assure you that my offer is made with the very best of intentions," he says. She is still trying to make her mind up about this character. Her mouth opens a bit. He carries on. "I would even go as far as to say you should be highly honored, perhaps even flattered." He leans towards her with persuasive emphasis. "For you have been fortunate enough to encounter someone who is—" He pauses mid-sentence and walks to his car. He picks up his jacket and brings it over. He confidently wraps it around her shoulders, much to her surprise and appreciation. He towers over her in his stature as they both stand there on the road. As I was saying, someone who is witty, chivalrous, impeccably mannered, and exceedingly handsome to boot. His manner is warm and friendly. He seems genuine. "And by no means immodest," Sarah says, getting a word in edgeways. "And by no means immodest," he parrots her. "In fact, if I have a fault, it is that I sometimes become overly enthusiastic." He lets out a hearty laugh. She smiles. His confidence has won her over. "Thank you," she says, looking grateful.